You do it now.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing.
That's where it gets annoying.
Yeah, well, it's showing up like on the one of the screens up there. And you guys also like stream that.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing. She works. Yay. Okay. We'll get started in just a minute, seeing if anybody else shows up. I guess we still have a few minutes. We got everything set up before 6 o'clock. It's practically amazing.
Actually, gotta finish putting together a workshop that I'm doing soon. First ever workshop. Hoping I can actually manage to talk for that long without going into a panic attack or something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm used to like,
Just takes practice.
it's like, I'm used to doing like just regular like 60-minute like panels.
Oh, yeah.
Which I mean, it usually takes me like practicing a bit to like make sure I'm straight with it in 60 minutes. So like, okay, well now I gotta do the opposite. Instead of trying to like make sure I keep myself like condensed, I'm gonna like actually like make sure I like have enough content and everything to fill 30 hours. Like, I don't know if I could do this.
Yeah, 3 hours is quite some time. Give a few more minutes. Yeah, I guess we'll give a few more minutes. See who shows. Anthony told me the topic was MS Build. I was like, well, that seems an odd topic for an Azure meetup. It was
Microsoft Build conference recap.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is the Build 2024 recap.
Well, I was thinking about the C# compiler.
Oh.
MS Build.
MS Build. Yeah, this is MSFT Build.
Yeah.
It's quite different.
Built like that whole Azure, we redid like Azure DevOps like the pipelines.
Uh-huh.
You had to tell it to like do the build.
MS Build.exe, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you build at least a classic .NET app. Now that like .NET Core, MS Build can build .NET Core, but .NET CLI handles it most of the time these days.
I probably have to do like research to get anything set up working just because I haven't. Like I feel goofy just because of the fact that like I took like all before they switched into like the format that they have now. I took basically all the courses
Mhm.
that Code Google had. So like, I had like the C#, the full stack JavaScript, React,
Mhm.
all that kind of jazz. But I haven't actually professionally written any code
Mhm.
since then, except for I did a for loop in C# once. I changed a label in a Windows format,
Yeah.
and it was a label where like you had to really be careful about where in the world you changed that label because you changed it in the wrong spot. Suddenly the whole app just broke, and nobody knew how in the heck it worked still because whoever had built it wasn't there anymore.
Oh yeah.
Nobody wanted to mess with it. So they were like, let's just put the new person on changing it. So it's just a label. Like, I get in there, I'm like, oh yeah, this looks right. Okay, then I'm like looking through. Like, oh, this looks like the right spot to change the label.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to actually change like the programmatic label. I just had to change the physical label.
Yeah,
Everything
it's
else was fine.
all presentation layer, yeah.
Yeah, and I changed it one spot, built it was broken completely.
Yeah.
Broken. I'm like,
Did you build it and try it before you changed it and built it and tried it? Because maybe it was already broken.
oh no, it had worked beforehand. Yeah, I had actually like built it once and
You had built it yourself, yeah.
to make sure I had run like all the setup stuff on my.
I don't even trust that an application that hasn't been built in a year is actually gonna build when I go,
Yeah,
something's gonna have changed on my machine.
right.
Was, at one of my last places I worked, they had it was a fairly important kind of an app because it was technically to report like legal compliance stuff,
Mhm.
but it was built back in like the early 90s. So like when I was still in elementary school, it was
Yeah.
built. And
Yeah.
I'm like, hadn't been updated past that, like at all.
Like classic ASP or
Yeah,
PHP
it had,
or
like,
something.
the ASPX like ending for like the URL and all that. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I know this is
Mhm.
yeah, just let me just looking at the way because again, it was like all the formatting was done with tables. So it was like
Yeah.
it was
Well,
like
that's how you did it. I mean, back then, if you were a purist about your front end design, you would say, never use tables for layout. But guess what? You couldn't make it work and look the way you wanted it to.
Yeah, right.
There are so many limitations to CSS.
Remember the tables that we built to do rounded edges? It was a big table, and so you put the corners with rounded
Like
images.
Was it like pixels? Like, oh yeah.
The rounded
images,
images, yeah. The very first rounded corners
Oh yeah. For sure.
was just
the border.
and the entire table was the size of the box you wanted, and the header was one big column,
Yeah.
and the edges were two tiny columns,
Yeah.
the size of the image.
The size of the image that you
Yeah.
needed for the rounded corner.
All right,
And that was Web 2.0.
it's 5 after if you want to
Let
check
me
to see
check
if
one
it
more time.
I guess Wi-Fi is it the one that's underscore humanity?
Yes, it is the underscore one, yes. And you'll have to agree to sell your soul away.
For some reason, my laptop it connect. Usually, I like to use my hotspot on my phone.
Yeah.
For some reason, my laptop is just like, no, I'm not doing this. You can just use something else.
All right, we'll get started in just a second once Josh gets back.
I remember when I was in high school and like the fact that HTML4 had been released was like a big deal, or was about to. I don't even know if it had
Oh, yeah,
been
yeah.
released yet.
Right.
I think it was like either it was recently released or it was like getting ready to be released.
Let me make sure nobody's messaged on Meetup, just in case. Told you I'd keep an eye on it, and then now I haven't. But nobody's messaged. It's all right.
I've kind of been keeping an eye on myself.
Oh, thank you so much. That,
Usually I'll get notifications. Of stuff.
Yeah. All right, I think Cam's coming up. I think I heard him and Josh. What's up, man? Sparse turnout. Sparse turnout. It's really about the after party.
I mean, we can just make this the after party.
Was anybody else with Josh, or was that?
No, he was walking down. I don't think.
Okay, you were walking. I thought he caught you down there.
No. When you say that, it makes it sound like he was like just like outside with the sign, just like spinning it. As your meetup, guys.
Maybe that's what we need. Good job next time, Cam.
Yeah.
I'm just happy I got to park like literally right outside.
Yeah, they got decent parking this time. All right, I guess we'll get started. Sparse turnout, but it's really more about seeing people, meeting people. It's battery.
I thought it was a fog machine.
Yeah.
So my mind's in a totally different place. I was like, oh, this is a different show, huh?
You thought it was what?
A fog machine.
Oh,
I was like, oh, okay. This is gonna be a party.
This talk was designed to be like interactive, just talking about the different products to see what we want to dig in. So feel free to stop me at any point, and we'll same slide as every other time I've been up here. I don't change that much, so still like to camp, still like to listen to music. Did you make it to music last time? Were you there? No, you didn't make it to the Brass DeVille.
No.
It was like a
Is
week
that
ago. That's my wife's band. She's the keyboardist.
Okay.
So if you're ever, keep your eye out on Brass DeVille.
All right. If I
Make
see
it out,
that,
I'll be there. I run their sound, so.
pretty integral part of the band.
Yeah, so I think everybody here might know what Build is, but Build is the annual developer conference. I had the privilege of going this year and to see all their new AI stuff, because that was the big focus this year, was AI. So a lot of the content we're going to be covering is about AI, not because I work in AI, but because pretty much the whole conference was just like AI. So the first thing I wanted to cover, since this is the Azure Meetup group, I thought the best thing to cover in the beginning is everything new that's inside of Azure, because they did release quite a bit. The first main thing is that Azure AI Studio and Azure AI Hubs are now generally available.
Is that what you demoed?
The like 4 or 5 meetup groups back, we went over what Azure AI Studio and Azure AI Hubs were. But they've released a lot since then, mainly their private connectivity stuff. So, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the biggest one is model as a service. Like, we went over a lot of the model as a platform and Azure AI or Open AI models, which were already model as a service, but now they have a new general, like any model as a service, as long as Microsoft's partnered with them. So like the Llama models, the Hugging Face models. So basically any LLM, large language model, that you want to bring into the cloud, you can host it inside of Azure without you having to pay for their GPUs, which is what we had to do with some of our models that I've built. So basically you can just use it as a service now. Microsoft manages the infrastructure. It gives them more flexibility with GPUs because they're not dedicating them to you and then them setting empty. So I think honestly they like it as much as we do, but then it does make things more tumultuous if they start running out of capacity. So we'll see. OpenAI integrations are there. There was very flimsy before. Like you could get OpenAI models, but it was really a kind of a separate service, the OpenAI was. Now that's integrated into Azure AI Studio. You get the ability to create projects, and then more importantly, you get the ability to create experiments. So for instance, if you created a chatbot using a large language model and it is working and it generates a lot of chats a day, you can go in there, take those chats that you've traced and say, I want to run an experiment. You can like change the model and say, how would these interactions be different if the model was different? And they'll go ahead, they'll do the evaluation for you. They actually use large language models. They say, which one of these is better? Which one of these is better? Which one of these is better? And they'll like spit out the like basically data on what model, or you could like change the temperature, like all the little tweakable things within a large language model you can do there, and those experiments will yield results that might have you change your features. Another thing we went over in that one was Azure AI Search. This was generally available because it was known as Cognitive Services before, but it has been renamed to Azure AI Search. What they've built into it though is the ability to do retrieval augmented generation purely in Azure AI Search. So you can connect Azure AI Search to OpenAI or to any of those models as a service and basically have it perform all of the operations for you and do data ingestion. So it'll take content and vectorize it so that vector search works, which if your vector search is just like a neat way to find specific content within a large corpus of data.
So does all of the things that used to fall under cognitive services like text to speech, speech to text, image recognition, that sort of thing fall under?
No, that it falls under Azure AI Studio now
Okay.
as a subcomponent called language services. So they've kind of, cognitive services became smaller as Azure AI Search. Now, of course, they can't rename any of the code that's behind the things. So like all of these are still cognitive services slash search or cognitive services slash language or cognitive services. OpenAI is part of cognitive services. So it was the umbrella of it all. Now Azure AI Studio is the umbrella, but all those namespaces and stuff are still the same.
It was something else before it was cognitive services. It was a name, like a person's name. I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know that one. It's a new one for me. You can also now connect to other things because it's all part of Azure AI Studio, and Azure AI Studio has a managed VNet. But instead of being a managed VNet per resource, like Cognitive Services has this little VNet. Now it's anything that's part of Azure AI Studio, Azure AI Hub, that has its own VNet. So you just need one private endpoint in there to like interconnect all the things to your stuff. Instead of being like a web of individual resources connecting to individual resources, and then you have to have 20 private endpoints on everything. Makes things easier.
So the private endpoint exists on the hub or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, there's a managed VNet as part of the hub. So
Okay, as far as the AI hub.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you have a lot of the cognitive or a lot of the AI resources are not private endpoint enabled until you put a hub in. So like model as a service is public internet until you deploy a hub and put that resource under that hub. It's an annoying part of it because I had to do this specific thing just to get private connectivity to model as a service, which model as a service is huge because you don't have to run Kubernetes clusters to run open source models. That's the big part.
Okay.
You don't have to pay for big GPUs in Kubernetes clusters.
Uh,
Speaking of, they did release some new virtual machines. So, and these are very specific for GPU workloads, right? They're either AMD GPUs or not. They're specifically for AI workloads. The first one are AMD GPUs as opposed to NVIDIA's, which have been dominating the market. I think they wanted to add some cheaper, more diverse options. So these are some AMDs, and then they have the Azure Cobalt, which are ARM processors, specifically for running just general purpose. It really isn't AI related, but it could become AI related based on another feature that was released in the cloud, which we'll talk about in a minute. Another cool feature that they released is AKS Automatic, which is basically it'll configure your. First off, it integrates with Fleet Manager, and Fleet Manager became bigger. Well, Fleet Manager basically gives you the ability to control all your Kubernetes clusters. I actually had evaluated it here at Humana when we were looking at, the expanded Kubernetes cluster options. But the offshore option, or not offshore, the on-prem options weren't that great for it at the time. Next is Kubernetes event-driven autoscaler. This previously was an add-on that you could add yourself. Now it is kind of built in using AKS Automatic, which is, again, huge. Because event-driven autoscaler is what lets your Kubernetes clusters no pools scale up as say a queue gets bigger. Queue gets bigger, it'll like throw some more nodes at it. And there's all kinds of events you can key into with Kata.
Is this like a new feature or is this a new?
It's built in now
Okay.
with AKS Automatic, where before you had to stand up the AKS cluster, then you had to install Kata, and then you had to like keep it updated and configured. Now they'll kind of manage it for you. Automatic also provides access to the Kubernetes APIs, which is huge because Fleet Manager, again, can be on-prem, it could be GCP, could be everywhere, but you can communicate with all those Kubernetes clusters through AKS Automatic. So you're hitting the cloud to potentially talk to something on-prem and manage it. Automated deployments, auto provisioning of nodes. So a lot of the features that we evaluated, some of those other Fleet Manager type things, they've now released, which really makes it a contender where a year or 2 years ago it really wasn't. And then they enhanced how policies can be applied to different clusters. So you can apply Azure-like policies to Kubernetes clusters elsewhere. Next, these aren't really resources, so I put them in its own category, which is different AI models. These are LLMs or SLMs or MLMs, small language models or large language models, but the 5.3 are really neat. So this is Microsoft's open source language models. They didn't try to tackle the LLM market. They were like, we'll let Llama and we'll let OpenAI and Google fight in that space. And so they wanted to tackle the medium and small language models, specifically to something we're going to talk about in a little bit called NPUs. These, like the small and the mini, can run on phones. Medium and vision and things like that can run on laptops without GPUs. As long as you have an NPU, which was announced that there as well.
Wait, what's an NPU?
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a little
Okay.
bit.
I was like,
You don't have one.
So with your large language models, like the industry standards, in a large language model is about 100 billion maybe 50 billion. The number, nobody stood on it, but these are like in the tens of billions of parameters. So that's why these don't really classify as LLMs. But they do have promising results. They don't have great results for language, so they're very good in English. When you get to normal Phi 3, it's okay, but it was already released before this. Vision's cool because it accepts mixed modal, so you can send pictures and you can send text together and it'll respond. And then, of course, the news that you probably have read about is the GPT-4 Omni going generally available, and then Microsoft launching it simultaneously so that it was available in the cloud. Well, that was announced at Build as well. So these are the large language models, and they are game changers. They do support mixed modal as well. These are the ones where, like, Khan Academy showing the video of, like, I don't know if you saw the GPT-4 Omni videos of what it's capable of doing. Like, it can, one of the things was, it was a kid playing a video game and it was talking to him about the video game, and he was just talking to it. No typing or anything like that. And it's like, oh, I see you're playing Minecraft. How's that going? Oh, you should really watch out for that guy. And
that's not creepy at all.
not creepy.
Creeper.
I, for one, welcome our AI overlords. They also released some other little models that I don't really know a lot about, but I was at a talk on them. They're basically niche models for, like, Arabic and English language, or transformer model for time series forecasting, I guess, is a big thing, which could, so like predicting the stock market.
Oh,
Like very, very specific, hey, this is good at that. But there are things that we need. Historically, we've used models specifically for it, but these are transformer models built for it, which transformer models are the basis of LLMs. Like, and these are they're just getting bigger. We can make bigger models than we were ever able to do before. So, developer productivity tools. One of the biggest announcements that they did was the semantic kernel, which, if you've heard of LangChain for LLMs, semantic kernel is basically the strongly typed language version of LangChain. It is supported in Python, but it's not heavily used in Python because everybody uses LangChain. But it is supported in C# and Java. And it basically lets you write agents, or really just complex workflows that uses large language models for reasoning. So instead of creating a workflow that says, when this condition is true, do this. When this condition is true, do that. Then go over here and then do these things. The new agentic flows that are coming out of large language models basically let you say, these are the states I need to be true. Like, I need you to gather information to do this unit of work. And then when you decide you have enough information, then do the work. And so the large language model can do things like send emails, receive responses to emails, make phone calls, listen in on the text on a phone call. And all that time it's collecting information and it's storing it in its little, like, conversation history. And then at one point it's like, I've got enough information, I'm gonna go do that thing. So it really can work like a person, and like a person does in the real world. It can just, interact with whatever. It can query a database. It could But instead of saying, you know, when you're at this step, query the database, you say, here's some schema. If you need anything from this, query it. And it just has the schema of the database. And it's like, I need to join these 3 tables together and get this data from this table about this person. Like,
Mhm.
and then it does. It just executes it and then gets the data. And
Trust issues, dog.
I don't know why.
Like the lane assist.
So
I don't know why
I'm assuming-
Humana Military would be worried about that.
I'm assuming that it can send emails if you told it how to send an email.
Well,
or
no,
given it-
so what it does is you define functions.
Yeah.
And you say you can use these functions, but you have to tell me when you need to call one, and you have to tell me the parameters you want me to pass to the functions. Now, but one of the parameters could be a SQL query. So basically you say, I'm defining a function that represents a database. The database schema looks like this, and you give it JSON schema or whatever the standard is. Call this function when you need any data from this database. And then you say, these are the parameters.
Okay, so you
SQL query
That's-
is a
that's-
string.
Yeah.
And then, so as the LLM is functioning, it might say, oh, in order to help this person or help this process, I need to get an address from an address table. And so it'll be like, I know the person's first and last name. Let me query it. It gets 4 records back. It receives those 4 records. It looks at the other data on there to figure out which one's that person. Like, oh, it's the 3rd one. Hopefully it doesn't mess up because it can. But then it'll continue whatever flow it needs. But it's not really a flow. It's just like decision. It's decisioning, really. It decides to do things and it compiles information to do other things. Well, semantic kernel is a language that you write those in. It's just a library that you say, I've got these functions, call this LLM, and then it takes care of like orchestrating when the LLM says I need to call that function, it just takes care of executing it. So you don't have to like have if statements.
It's like learning a lot of new syntax.
Yeah, I didn't bother. I just orchestrated myself. It's just a switch statement. I can handle switch statements. So they did also release Azure AI Toolkit for Visual Studio Code extensions. Basically lets you run some small experiments on your local machine against your own GPU or NPUs if you have them for like fine tuning. It also lets you integrate with Azure AI Studio things, just like the Azure extensions do, but specifically for AI. This one was cool. I actually didn't. I didn't hear this talk. I was like putting together this talk here, and they released File Explorer Git integrations. So yeah, just in File Explorer, you can see like the status of your commits, like last commit message built in to File Explorer now.
Okay.
I know. I didn't know.
I was like, wait, what are
It's
you
just
saying?
a column. Like see the last commit date, just like you do with like command line integrations.
Yeah,
It's built in now to
first GUI.
File Explorer.
My first thought when you said File Explorer integrations was like, remember Tortoise SV? And
Oh yeah,
like that was cool. For the
that was
time.
cool. Yeah.
I mean, it definitely worked.
Copilot was a really big thing. Copilot's just a branding around a concept of things working together that are Microsoft and using LLMs. So they're like Copilot for Word, and it just means using an LLM inside of Word to help you out, or Copilot for Office 365. Well, one of the things they released was Copilot Studio, which is basically almost like an SDK plus a development environment for you to create, almost like a Power Apps kind of user interface for you to create your own copilots. So it just makes it easier. So you don't have to stand up like an app service and then write all this app servicey stuff for creating your own copilot for whatever product you have. If you have like a website or something, you could add a copilot for your website, which has a chat bot, but it also assists users using their framework without having to do all the plumbing behind the scenes. And by doing it, they also have connectivity, just like Power Apps, into other products like Power Apps or like Office 365. So inside of your Copilot, you can build those. But more importantly, it lets you build AI agents within those Copilots. So like getting information, like say you had a call center software, that's what you managed. You could add a Copilot into it that could listen to the SIP conversations and go get data about a user to show to the agent while they're working. But it's just a framework for building those types of AI-enabled applications. They also did some desktop style enhancements, mainly NPUs. NPUs, they actually released several laptops at the conference that were for sale by different manufacturers. NPUs are neural processing units, and we're going to start seeing these in all of our devices because most likely a lot of your assistants are going to become AI enabled. Well, they need something more than a general processing unit, like a CPU, to be able to execute. So this is like the olden days when they were like, you know what, CPUs don't do great math. Yeah, just math.
Let's let you pay more for the DX version that has the math coprocessor.
Yes, or you could, if your motherboard has a slot, you could buy the math coprocessor and plug it in.
Yeah.
And it just does multiplication faster. But then they started integrating that into the CPU. So this might happen here, but for now, they need to iterate on these really fast. So they're going to be separate units. So this is somewhere between a GPU and a CPU. So much like GPUs, it's parallel processing more than like 3 or 4 or 8, you know. But it's also the same instruction set, but it also doesn't need to do the things as quickly, right? You're not going to need to, like, video games take, you know, thousands of individual executions at the same time against large memory sets and things like that. So these NPUs are just kind of a cut down version of a GPU with parallel processing and interconnectivity. But Microsoft is building it in to the operating system to integrate with it. So they released what's called Copilot Plus, which is basically Copilot plus PC. It's a Copilot for your computer itself, but it is itself just a framework for accessing the NPUs. So just like they did DirectX, did they do DirectX, or they did the other one, right? Was it Direct? I don't remember. Anyway, that was DirectX was basically a way to access the GPU, right? This is a way to access the NPU. And of course, this has been in the works for a while, so it's interesting that it's so secretive. But they released, like, Adobe Creative Suite now can use the NPU. So like when you used to get hardware acceleration on your home device because you had a GPU, you can get hardware acceleration on your laptop on the NPU if you have one of these Copilot Plus PCs. And then they released, along with some other things like visual effects, audio mixing, basically anything that an AI could run on. They already had some software designed to use it. And that's presentation. 35 minutes. Solid.
And we saved all that money by not going to build.
Yeah, didn't. Well, so my value in build is, I mean, the talks are great, but my opinion, the value is being able to walk up to somebody who's like actually building the stuff on the back end and be like, why does this work like this? Can you help me understand what you were thinking? And oftentimes they were like, oh yeah, that was just a mistake. It's like, oh, dang it.
We purposely didn't mention that during my talk.
Gotta wait for V2 to come out.
If there's anything you gotta learn, it's an iterative process.
So looks like we have some
You do
people,
everything great the first time.
some people online. Doc Dave said, you know, the gaming software companies will be using NPUs like crazy. For all, oh yes, absolutely. NPCs in games, 100%.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be the thing that drives the industry. Are NPCs in video games who are just using that NPU to like. I mean, honestly, it'll probably be written in 5.3 language model, the dialogue that you're having. And you might even be able to dialogue with the NPCs, just talk to them.
Yeah.
And they have a small agentic flow where if certain conditions are met, they will give you a quest or whatever. And instead of it being, hey, you get to choose between 5 options, no, it's just you get to talk to the dude. And do you remember what happened 2 weeks ago in the video game? Well, you're going to have to bring it up or he's not going to give you that quest.
I guess that, yeah, if you have like a big time space, I'm thinking like was it like Helldivers where like you're doing a collective mission?
Yeah.
It's like everyone's in on the take, and it's like, oh yeah, when you go in and talk to this person, they're gonna be like, yo, 3 weeks ago they blew up this planet. We're about to ride the night and go back and and like, kind of be a part of it. But you can use your NPU to be able to do
Well,
that.
what's super cool is this whole agentic flow is really fast and easy to write. Like you don't have to write a lot of code at all to get it. Like you literally are just writing basically a system prompt to get these agents written. So it's pretty nuts. I might do a talk at the .NET meetup group. I'll propose it to Chad about like agents in C#.
I know he's looking for someone to speak in October.
Well, I'm also looking for somebody to speak in October, so he and I might be able to do a small exchange. Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting times.
What are people going to come up with in the next Grand Theft Auto?
Dude, NPUs would be crazy.
I don't know, but probably Grand Theft Auto will be Skynet. That's where it'll be some little hoodlum inside of a Grand Theft Auto that breaks out of his little confines.
It's free, guys.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Anybody else online? It's severely delayed, so I have to wait a minute before I say nobody has any questions. All right. Well, anybody who is online, thank you all for joining. And let me quickly see if anybody's on the other YouTube side of the house. Nope, just Doc. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to cut the stream.